is really something that we might say in terms of Buddhism is in the deep end of the pool. So for those of you who are either just kind of wandered in here today or are kind of new to mindfulness or even very new to even Buddhist teachings, I will do my best to make everything understandable. So in our community, we have lots of what we call intensive periods of practice. Oh, let me say, it just popped in my mind. What I wanted to say in the beginning was I want to express my gratitude and the gratitude of all of us because this day doesn't just happen. If you got here at 8 o'clock, you'd see there were people around setting up, cleaning the bathrooms, cleaning the floor, setting up tables downstairs, just kind of getting everything together. So, we come today and we can enjoy this day because of other people are offering service to us. And hopefully in our community we do practice a lot of service, and hopefully we'll all get a chance of serving them. And they can come at some point and just sit down and be at ease. So for many, many months, we have these intensives, and one of our intensives that's going on now is around this text called The Way of the Bodhisattva by Shantideva. Again, there are lots of teachings on this and lots of recordings of prior talks. I won't go into it. But basically, for those who knew, in the form of Buddhism that we teach, there is the path to awakening, and it's called the Bodhisattva path. And it is a path that facilitates the transformation of our body, speech, and mind into the body, speech, and mind of an awakened person, which is basically a really good person. But it does it all in the service of wanting to help others. We want to be free of our own suffering. We want to awaken to our own potential. We want to free ourselves of all our afflictions, all our narrowness, all our egocentricity. Why? For the happiness of everyone. My happiness, but also the happiness of everyone. My family, my friends, and eventually the world. Because all, as we heard earlier, all beings, everyone, all of us, everyone, those we like, those we don't like, those that like us, those that hate us, it doesn't matter. Everyone has essentially a very pure, undefiled mind. It's just covered over. There's just lots of wrong thinking, emotional afflictions, skewed views. Anyhow, that's a whole subject unto itself. But this capacity that we all have to be totally free, to be happy and free of suffering, and then to want to participate in sharing it and showing others the way is what's called this path of the Bodhisattva. And the kind of most well-known text is called The Way of the Bodhisattva, wonderful translation. There are many translations, but it really sets forth by this 8th century Indian master all the practices that one does, all the teachings one does. It's really a manual of awakening. And we are now in our intensive in the 9th chapter. The 9th chapter is called the Wisdom chapter. And there have been chapters up to now on altruism and the altruistic view, and generosity, and meditation, and mindfulness, and introspection, and patience. I mean, all the kind of virtuous aspects of life. But the culmination is wisdom. Okay? And in the Buddhist meditative path, while mindfulness, learning to live in the present moment, is certainly beneficial, it is really just the ground. It is the beginning of the path of transformation. I mean, mindfulness allows us to be in the present to see what's going on. But mindfulness in and of itself is not transformative. Right? To transform ourselves, we need wisdom, we need insight, we need understanding. Right? Because even though, we're mindful, that there are these two roads to take, I am very aware that there's a road that goes this way and I'm a road to go that way. See, mindfulness reveals that. But it's wisdom that allows us to make the right choice. It's understanding that allows us to make the right choice. So understanding's a little deeper, but you all understand that, right? Right? I mean, hopefully in your life, you are now a little wiser than you were when you were younger, right? Just nod your head yes. Right? I mean, we're wiser, right? I mean, it may have been a rocky road, but hopefully we are at a point where we have learned something, right? From our past, from our mistakes, from observing others, right? So in Buddhism, that's called wisdom. It's kind of having insight into how things are so we can see more clearly and make good choices, right? So wisdom, in an ordinary worldly way, we all understand how essential it is. Does anybody know anybody who doesn't have any wisdom at all? Right. What kind of lives do they lead? Right? Who just can't see their actions and the effects of their actions, right? On themselves, on others, who constantly make wrong choices. Right? You know what you know what I'm talking about, or maybe you remember a time in your life when you were like that, or maybe you still see in your life you're still somewhat like that. Right? So we would say we lack wisdom. Right? Or another way of saying it from the other side is we're ignorant. In this sense, we're ignorant of how things really are and how really to act so we can make good choices in our life. Okay. Now, so that's kind of a way of introduction. Well, let's see if we can make some sense of this today. So actually, Shantideva's first, and by the way, this whole text is in verse. It's a poem. So not only, I mean, there's a great teaching and practice, but it's quite beautiful. I mean, some more than others verses. So in verse 1, he says, all the branches of the Buddha's teaching, the enlightened one expounded for the sake of wisdom. Therefore, they must cultivate this wisdom who wish to have an end of suffering. So there is a very clear statement that is being made that if we want to practice a spiritual path, in this case the Dharma path, to really liberate ourselves from suffering, it is through wisdom that we can do this. Mindfulness and concentration and really all the other good practices we do. Because again, many of us here, we're good people. Probably I would imagine, I don't know you all, but imagine kind of people who come to our center are basically good people or who want to be good people, right? And I'm sure in many ways we try to be a good person, right? And yet we're often kind of frustrated or disturbed or disappointed that even though we know better, we often don't act right that way. And again, and that is because not that there's something intrinsically wrong with us, but we really just lack wisdom. We are still ignorant. So, those who want to end suffering. Okay. Now, I'm trying to go slow here. So this is going to get a little tricky. Okay? So we're getting right to the heart of things now. So let's see if we can understand this. He says, I'm skipping now to verse 5. He says, when ordinary folk perceive phenomena, okay? So just imagine ordinary folk means who? Us. Normal people, okay? When we perceive phenomena, that just means when we perceive anything. When our eyes perceive a sight, that's That's a phenomena. When our ear hears sounds, that's a phenomena. When our nose smells odors, that's a phenomenon. Okay, so it's really saying when ordinary people like us perceive anything with any of our five senses, or even our mental, our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions, our memories, whenever we perceive any kind of phenomena, we think they're real, not illusory. And he says this then is a subject of debate where ordinary people and yogis here meaning kind of people who are enlightened, who have wisdom, who are meditators, forms and so forth. All right. When we look around the room, these are forms. Okay, I'm a form. There's a form. There are about 40 or 50 forms in here. This is a form, this is a form, this is a form, this is a form, that's a form, right? Anything that has form. Right? Forms and so forth, all that we perceive exists by general acclaim, but not by valid reasoning. Okay? Okay? So this is big. Okay? He's saying something he's sort of saying, again, ordinary people and yogis, they see the forms of the world, the sounds of the world, the sights of the world, the smells of the world. But ordinary people think they're real, while yogis or people with insight see them as illusory. Illusory means what? Anybody ever been to see an illusionist? Right? Or seen them on videos? You know what an illusionist is? What's an illusionist? What? Yeah, but when you actually see it, if they're a good illusionist, you think it's true. Right? Right? You think he just cut that woman's body in half. Right? He just made he just made something disappear. He just pulled a rabbit out of an empty hat. Right? So an illusion, if you think about it, an illusion is something that if we look at it, it appears like it's really happening, doesn't it? Everybody in the audience goes, wow. But is it really happening in reality, or is it an illusion? What? It's an illusion. It's not really happening. Okay? Again, other examples are dreams. Everybody here maybe have dreams last night? Or can remember having a dream in their life? Just want to make sure we're all in the same reality. Okay, everybody remember dreaming. Now, did you notice that when you were in your dream world, it seemed real? Didn't it? I mean, you seemed real. All the things that were going on seemed real. You had real emotions. Right? It all seemed very real. Right? But the truth is, are dreams real? What? No. They're like an illusion. Right? They appear real when you're in them, but when you subject them to more critical thinking, you realize what? They're not real. Okay? Now I can give other examples, like a mirage, and there are many kind of examples. But we're talking about something quite profound and yet something so simple. And we'll talk about the implications of this. This has major implications. This is in traditional Buddhist teachings, fundamental teachings that kind of most Buddhists agree on are the law of cause and effect. This is how the world operates according to cause and effect. Dukkha, that people who do not know how the law of cause and effect or don't know how things really are create suffering for themselves and others, dukkha. And the third one is anicca, or non-self, or sort of emptiness, and that's what we're dealing with today. Okay. So, they exist by general acclaim. We would all agree, right, that they exist, but not by valid reasoning. What he's saying is, basically things are not as they appear. Okay? Kevin, would you mind just coming up here? I feel like I'm an illusionist. Yeah. Well, why don't you sit here? All right. So we'll use this gentleman. Okay? Now, just as a disclaimer, did we talk before the show today? No. What? All right. Even though I do know Kevin, I haven't seen him in months and we have not talked. So he's. Now, would everybody agree, based on normal common sense, that he's real? I mean, doesn't he look real? Right? All right. Everybody agrees he's a real thing. Right? Anybody disagree? I mean, we would say that if somebody said, no, he's not a real thing, we would say that person is a little crazy, right? Because, of course, there's Kevin, right? He's got a head, his head's basically in the right place. I mean, he's, Yeah, so he looks very real to us. Okay, now, so when Shantideva says, ordinary people, when they see a form, they think it's real. But yogis know it's an illusion. Okay? So let us use Kevin to see what that means. Okay? But first understand that we accept that he appears solid and real. Right? Okay? We're not saying he's a total illusion. We're saying he does, in the world of appearances, he does appear real. Okay? Like in the world of dreams, do dreams appear real? Yeah, it's only when you're awake that you know what? They're not real. But in the dream world, when we're in the dream world, they appear real. So in the world of forms, he looks real. Okay. Now, the key phrase that is used is self-existent. Like, it would mean that Kevin exists as a real self. Right? Right? Like there's a Kevin here. You see, he's like a real thing. I mean, that's the way it appears, doesn't it? But if he's really a real self-existent thing, he would always have to have been like this, right? I mean, he would have to have been created by a real self-existent Kevin. But Kevin, what created you? What were the cause that created you? And this is, in the world of reality. Your parents. And actually, it was an egg and a sperm. Little tiny things came together. So that was the cause of Kevin. You didn't cause Kevin. Kevin wasn't always like this, right? He was actually caused by non-Kevin things. Is that true? See, it gets interesting. Because for Kevin to really be a self-existent Kevin, he would have to have been caused by Kevin, right? Or Fred would have to have been caused by Fred. But Kevin wasn't created by anything that was Kevin. He was created by an egg and a sperm that came from his parents that actually had the DNA and the whole thing of endless ancestors and human beings of all types, right? Have all created this form. Is that clear? All right. Now, Kevin, have you always looked like this? I mean, like when you were born, did you look like this? What? I mean, if we saw your baby pictures or your elementary school pictures or your high school pictures or your marriage, when you got married, did you look like this? No. So even though we go right now, oh, here's Kevin. The truth is, this is something that's endlessly changing. I mean, it used to be this big, right? Then got bigger, right? But we don't see that when we look at Kevin, right? How do we see Kevin? Like he is right now. He appears to be the solid, real Kevin. Is that clear? But it's really, that's the way it appears, but it's not true. Right? There's no essential permanent thing there called Kevin that was always there. I mean, Kevin, are you still the same as when you were 3 years old? No. When you were 23 years old? No. 33? Yeah, I don't know how old you're, 43? Getting close, all right? Yeah, so that's the truth, right? Yeah, it's all just in flux and you're just constantly changing and you're not the same person you were at all, even though you may have a memory of things, right? Okay. Now, oh, by the way, how come you're called Kevin? Oh, oh, so you didn't come out with a little tag on you saying this is Kevin. Hold on a second. So you were never Kevin. Somebody decided to call you Kevin. Well, that's interesting. I thought this was Kevin. It's just a name that somebody attached, labeled this. But this isn't Kevin, right? This is this. And as we've said, it's been endlessly changing. And now let's try something else here. But does Kevin look solid? Yeah, doesn't he appear solid? Like this is Kevin. But if I had a little very sharp scalpel, and if I opened him up, what would we find inside? Would we find a little Kevin? What would we find? Right? See, his body looks very solid, doesn't it? It appears solid, but yet it's just made up of parts. Is that true? And all those parts are made of parts, and all those parts are made of parts. And you can keep going to atoms and subatomic and particles and energy. I mean, right? Even though he appears solid, he's not. Right? There's nothing, and even though we call this a body, you see, when we say, oh, this is Kevin's body, but what is the truth? Is there anything here called a body? No, it's just parts, right? There's no self-existent permanent thing called a body. There's just parts that are all kept from falling out by this bag of skin. Isn't that true? So Kevin is just really a mass of really fairly disgusting parts, right? If anybody's ever been around an autopsy, or you know what I mean, right? You're just a bag of fairly disgusting parts, but has a nice looking outward form made of skin, which is also in the process of deteriorating. Is that true? Yeah. And even though we call this a body, there's no such thing as a body. It's just parts. And if we went looking inside, we did a complete autopsy, we would not find any self-existent thing called Kevin's body. We just find parts. Is that clear? Now, we would say a human being is what? Made up of a body and a mind. Would you agree? I mean, that's basically what a human being is. Has a body, has a mind. So, hopefully, and again, we could do more, but hopefully we understand now that Kevin is not this body. And this body is not a solid, self-existing thing. It's just made up of parts, created by your ancestors and your parents, and has a very limited time on this earth. Hold on. When we look at Kevin, do we see the impermanent nature of Kevin? Do we see him as an infant? Do we see him in his mummy's tummy? Do we see him as a child? Do we see him aging? And do we know that he's going to die? Do we see all that? No. He looks very solid and alive right now, doesn't he? That's the way he appears. But things are not as they appear. And as Shantideva said, these things exist by general acclaim, but not by valid reasoning. Now, so let's say we've done okay up to now. All right, I get it. But there has to be some thing here called Kevin, right, Kevin? I mean, even Kevin believes there is. That's right, that's the problem. Because when Kevin looks in the mirror, he goes, what? Good morning, Kevin. Right? How's Kevin looking today? Right? I mean, you think that thing you see in the mirror is you. Right? And when anybody sees this body who knows you, they go, good morning, Kevin. As if he's this body. But as we just found out, this body was created by his parents. Right? And has no self-existence at all, and is just in the process of deterioration, all the parts. And some parts give out more faster than others, just like a car. Is that true? See, this is where we have to use this wonderful intellect that we've been given, this wonderful capacity we have for logical, rational thinking, to use it in a way that we see what's really going on in reality. And often what's going on in reality is not how things appear. Right? If we take things as they appear, we will always be liable to be fooled. Right? Are there not people in this world who appear as nice people, and yet you find out later they're not that nice? Right? The world of appearances is not always the way things really are. Is that true? Have you ever eaten a delicious smelling and tasting meal and gotten food poisoning? Why? It appeared to be quite delicious. But things are not always as they appear. Situations, people, Kevin. All right. So, Kevin does not have a self-existing permanent body. There's no such thing as Kevin's body. We take it apart, we can't find, there's no little tiny thing called Kevin, right? Or a body. It's just made of parts. Now, if that which and because Kevin, if I said, are you Kevin, you would say what? Yes. Okay. So, there is a belief you have that there is some self-existing permanent thing that has been there, when you were born, when you were 5, when you were 10, when you're right up to now, that is Kevin. But it's not your body, because your body's constantly been changing. So then it has to be what? Mind. It has to be his mind. Well, that gets interesting. So, if I said to you, Kevin, do you have a mind? Yes. Kevin believes he has a mind. Don't most people answer yes? That's, again, ordinary people. Do I have a mind? Of course I have a mind. If you ask most people, do you have a self? Are you a self? And most ordinary people would say what? Of course. Who's your self? Me. Right? Isn't this the way ordinary people talk? Right. So another way to look at it is, if I said, is this Kevin's body? You would say what? Yes. So where does Kevin dwell? Well, we've already done an autopsy on your body. We couldn't find a Kevin there, so he exists in your mind. I agree with you. He must exist there. So Kevin must exist in your mind, and you must have a mind. This is like a magic trick. So everybody stay with me. Okay, now let's see what happens. So Kevin, this Kevin who identifies this is Kevin's body, right? And identifies this as Kevin's mind, and identifies a self as Kevin, right? Is it a self-existent thing? Where does it exist? Well, that's the world of appearances. You know, I mean, just because I feel like it's a beautiful sunny day, does that really mean it is? Right? Or if I feel like I look outside and it looks like this, and I said, this must be the beginning of the great deluge. It's going to rain forever. Right? It's never going to be sunny again. Doesn't it appear? It's certainly like that. But I would be fooled, wouldn't I? Just because I have a feeling. Anybody ever have a good feeling about something and you turned out to be totally wrong? Yeah, feelings aren't, all they're cracked up to be. I mean, anybody ever remember being a teenager? Do you ever feel like you met the love of your life? What? What happened? Yeah, feelings aren't always correct. They're feelings, but they may be totally based on a misperception. So you feel like Kevin dwells within your mind as a self-existent thing called Kevin. So where does he dwell? I mean, right now. No, or where is your mind's a good question. Where is your mind?
Probably somewhere in this body.
Hold on, we just did the autopsy and we couldn't find anything called a mind. So where does Kevin dwell? If he dwells in your mind as a self-existent thing, you should be able to see it. I mean, am I right? Self-existent thing means it's a thing. A thing is something that can be identified. If it can't be identified, it's not a thing. I mean, is everybody with me? This is not upper level philosophy, okay? This is very simple. We all know this. So you looked in your body, you couldn't find Kevin. Now, when you look in your mind, can you find Kevin? I mean,
I see all sorts of different Kevins in my mind. The happy Kevin.
Really, you see a little happy Kevin in there? Hold on. I mean, he's about this big and he's got a big smile on his face? See, this is great because we talk this way. You know what this is called in Buddhism? Delusion. You see? A delusion is what? Anybody here ever been deluded? Yeah, what is a delusion? Well, something you think is real, but it's actually what? Yeah, it's a delusion. It's not real. It's a false idea. Okay? So a delusion is an idea that's patently false, right? An illusion is something that appears to the senses, but's really not there. Okay? Okay. So Kevin just said, there are lots of Kevins running around in my mind. There's a happy Kevin. And so I just asked him a very simple question. What do these little Kevins look like? And Kevin goes, what? Well, I mean, are they there? And yet 2 minutes ago he said they were there. Yeah. No, you as an ordinary person, you are showing up totally reliable. Okay? But so we're just using Kevin to really help us understand ourselves. Because we all talk this way, right? Okay. So when you really then look beyond appearances, you go, well, it appears like I got lots of different selves in there. There's a happy Kevin and a sad self, and a smart Kevin and a deluded Kevin, and right, you know what I mean, and a healthy Kevin and an unhealthy Kevin, right? I mean, people talk this way. But when you look in there, do you see lots of these little Kevins running around? They all have their own separate bedroom? No, you don't. Okay, just checking. All right. So when you look in your mind for Kevin, what do you see? What do you find? You're not finding Kevin. You're not finding anything called Kevin. Well, that's interesting, right? Because you've been under the mistaken notion for your whole life that there is some solid, self-existent, permanent thing called Kevin. True? Yeah. By the way, do you have a mind? Look, just look to where you think your mind is. What do you see? So you mean the mind is another one of those false attributions that we think it's a thing, but when we actually look into our mind, we don't see anything? It's not a thing. Yeah. I mean, thoughts, feelings, perceptions come and go, but you can't find a solid thing called a mind. You can't find a solid thing called a self. You can't find a solid thing called a body. No, you're no, Kevin. You finally have the possibility of getting out of trouble. Of getting out of trouble. Because why are we troubled in this life? Think about it. Why are we troubled in this life? Yeah, yeah. Kevin suffers in this world because he believes there's a solid Kevin, and this solid Kevin needs to be what? Yes, yeah. He's got to be always taken care of. His needs have to be met. His desires have to be met. He needs to be protected. Can't be too vulnerable, right? He needs to be advanced. He needs to get people to love him. He needs to be respected. He needs to be noticed. Right? Everybody know what I'm talking about. Everybody got that person inside them who's always barking these orders to you? Always got to be the center of attention. Always got to look smart. Don't want anybody to judge him, right? Does everybody have that list in their head of all the things yourself is endlessly demanding from you in life? It's endless, right? I would imagine Kevin barks orders to you all day. And wherever you go, he's always scanning, right, to make sure that his needs are met. Right? That he's safe, that he's it, right? And yet, if I heard you correctly, when you look for him, you cannot find him. You see, if he's just an illusion, just an appearance that has no reality to it other than it just appeared for a moment and then disappears, why do you give so much credibility to it? It's crazy. In Buddhism, we don't use the word crazy, which it really is. We use the word deluded, or we're ignorant. We're ignorant of what? How things really are. Right? So coming back to Paula, so when there was restlessness, when there was uncomfortableness, why did it bother you? Does your body have a big issue with being restless? No, it doesn't. No, your body. What? What? Yeah, well, poor body. You know, I mean, we identify with everything else, and we want to control everybody, right? We want to control our family. We want to control our friends. We want to because why? Because we claim them as ours. Okay, so let's try this again, Paula. Paula, does your body itself have a problem with little restlessness? No. Does your body have a problem with a little uncomfortableness? No. Who's got the problem? Yeah, me. Can you see it's you like Kevin? You see? Yeah, but we all are. I mean, I'm just, this is what we're all in. But you see, what if there was just restlessness? What if there was just unpleasantness? and no self to make a big deal about it. How would that be? Much easier in life. Yeah. It doesn't mean you might not move your, you know what I mean, if you were in pain. I mean, it doesn't mean that. But the suffering comes from what? The self that's always what? Yeah, expecting, commenting, having, all kinds of stuff. So we've made Kevin disappear, and yet he still appears to be here. But in reality, Kevin doesn't exist. In the same way that last night's dream, when we were in the dream, it seemed real, but now today we know what? There was nothing solid or permanent in that dream. Right? Just dream people, and a dream you. If you were the center of that dream, it was just a dream you. Having dream experiences. Right? Yeah. So the world itself is said is sort of dreamlike. I mean, has everybody in here had any experiences in the course of their life? Depending on your age, you've had 33,000 thoughts. How many experiences do we have a day? Lots. Alex always gives me the scientific answer. Yeah, so we've all had thousands and tens of thousands of experiences in our life, right? From childhood, right? Even in utero we had experiences, right? Positive ones, negative ones, good ones, bad ones, pleasant ones, unpleasant ones, right? Where are all those experiences? Where are they all? Well, no, but your mind, you don't have a mind. Well, see, it's very interesting. Do those experiences exist as a real thing? None of them do. All those experiences are gone. Why are they gone? Because they never really existed. What we say? Never really existed? Never really existed as a permanent thing. It was just the sound of the bell. Those are just words, but there's no real thing called the sound of a bell. It's just something that appears and then disappears. It's a momentary. It has a moment, we can't say that the bell doesn't exist. We say, yeah, it has a temporary existence, but then it's gone, right? It's gone. Every experience we have, gone. Every thought you've had since you came into the meditation hall today, where are they all? Gone. Paula, where's that restlessness and that? Gone. They're not gone because we made them gone. They're not gone because now we're thinking clearly. They're gone because that is their nature. They're empty of solidity. They're empty of permanence. They're empty of self-existence. Questions? I mean, this is like deep, deep stuff. I mean, this is sort of like the comic book version. Okay, just her first and then you, yeah. And please feel free to challenge me to say anything you want, okay? I mean, this is totally open. Yes? No. She says, is, so in what? Yeah. So this is where kind of Buddhism and even the Buddha. Okay, so the question is, so is there any one thing that is a permanent thing. And according to Buddha, no. I mean, that's where he parted, with his culture, with his society. Not his culture, I mean, he grew up in his culture. But, that was unique about his teaching. He said he could not find anything, right? And if you read Shantideva, and this is, chapter 9 is not for the faint-hearted, if anybody's read it. And there are many, many wonderful, brilliant commentaries written on it, which, if you think Shantideva, just what he wrote isn't easy to understand. When you read the commentaries, then you really are in deep trouble. But what he does in verse is he basically takes apart any experience, idea, philosophy, religion, anything that one could have that we see, that one can think of self-existence, such as the body. Takes the body completely apart. Takes the mind completely apart. Takes the self completely apart. Takes sensory experiences completely apart. Takes every concept we could possibly have apart. Now, we'll talk in a few minutes, so what's left? Which is an interesting question, right? Because what he presents is this experience of life that is totally fluid and open, right? Endlessly, it's a process that's endlessly changing and nothing really solid in any permanent way. I mean, Kevin's still here, and he sort of looks the same. But, we know if we stayed around here for 10 or 20 or 30 years, my hand would probably begin to shrink. And he may even die. May even die on me. Yes. Mm-mm. No. See, that's important. And I'll say that in a minute because Buddha was a brilliant guy in his realization. So you're exactly right. If one goes, oh, then if everything is empty, if nothing is solid, then therefore it must all be meaningless, right? And therefore one could become completely nihilistic, right? Or one could become completely hedonistic. Well, I mean, nothing is permanent, nothing's solid. I might as well just totally indulge myself and get as much as I can in this life. Does this sound like anybody we know? Yeah. Right? So you're absolutely right. So, there's a lot here, but it's the Buddhist path is called the middle way, which means, see, it doesn't deny the world of appearances. This is why, because usually we go, well, there's the material world and the spiritual world. There's the way things really are, and then there's the way things really, we kind of divide up the world, the spiritual, the material, Buddhism says no, right? That, yes, Kevin, this form that he appears in has a relative, right? Like last night's dream seemed real, right? And one would say, what is your name? Tracy. If I said to you, Tracy, even though dreams aren't real, right? I mean, you know that, right? Would you prefer to have a happy dream or a nightmare? Yeah. So, which means that even in the dream world, you accept that there are good appearances and bad appearances. Okay, so Buddhism says, yes, things are fundamentally empty of any solidity and permanence, but in the world of forms, positive and negative operates. And obviously, in the world of form, in our relative world, the world we all live in, which is the world of appearances, right? Would we rather have a happy world or a miserable world? Right? We would say happy. I mean, so it doesn't deny that. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. But again, please understand, I don't want to say it, but Tracy, even though comes out of the Buddhist teaching, it's based on reality. So it should be accessible. It's Yeah. It's not a religious truth. Yeah, so in that sense, yeah, so that's fine. But go on. No. There's no such thing as enlightenment permanent. Again, enlightenment's a word. What's it a word for? What? It's a word that describes an understanding. But can you find a thing called an understanding? No. See, this is the great mystery of this life, right? Like, like if I said, Kevin, Kevin would say, just respond to me. Kevin, right? So Kevin responds. Or Kevin might say, what? Right? So even though when Kevin looks for Kevin, he can't find anything in there. And yet, would we all agree that something just said what? See, this is the wonder of this whole thing. Right? There again, I don't want to get too confusing here. It's like there's something, but this something is a nothing, which is hard for us to get because we want things to be solid. We want things to be permanent. And the idea that somehow, let's say, our mind, and again, our mind, you can see words just distort things, that would everybody agree there is something here called our mind, right? Right? Because we're all aware of one another, we have thoughts, we have feelings, right? So this word mind does refer to something. But when we think it's a permanent, solid thing, that's where again, like we call this Kevin's body. But again, it's just a bag of skin with a lot of parts, none of which is a body. Right? You put all those parts together and you wrap it in skin and you call it what? A body. Are you kind of with me? I mean, this is not easy. I remember I was teaching this once years ago at a retreat, and I noticed that the cook had put out brownies for dessert, and a lot of people have a sweet tooth, so there was a lot of kind of activity around the brownie thing. A lot of, and I could see people, wanting to take a second one. You know what I mean? But should I? That kind of. There's a lot going on around those brownies. All right. So when we came back in the meditation hall, I had kind of taken one of those brownies and wrapped it in and I held the brownie up, and I said, "Look at this brownie, so delicious looking, right?" And everybody here who likes chocolate or likes sweets, can you see how pleasurable just seeing it is to you, and how you would love to have it, wouldn't you? And everybody's going, yes. And then I took the brownie and I crumbled it, right? Just crumbled it. And I held up the piece of paper and I said, here, who wants it? Nobody wanted it. Well, it's the same stuff. I mean, isn't it? Right? I mean, what's different? Just we've played with the form. And when the form looks a certain way, it's desirable. But if it's a bunch of, right? If you went to the bakery and there were just piles of crumbs, chocolate cookie, crumbs, we laugh. Would anybody be buying the crumbs and bringing them home? No. But, I mean, that's what a cookie is, isn't it? Just a bunch of crumbs put together in a certain shape. When it gets to be a certain shape, it's desirable. But, I mean, isn't that true? Just like bodies. So let's say Kevin is in relationship with somebody, right? And they may have desire for one another, right? You know how human beings are. They have desire for one another. Now, do you think your wife would find you desirable if we just laid all your parts out? Well, you think that would do a lot for your sex life? No, or vice versa. And yet, what is the truth? That's really the way Kevin's body looks. Right, I won't tell it. But isn't that true? I mean, I know it's hard for us to admit, but that's true. And when we saw the body that way, we'd go, yuck. Ugh, and it smells bad. But yet, when it's packaged in a certain way, it's what? Desirable. Now again, we live in the world of appearances. We live in the world of relationships. We can't be thinking this way. But we have to know that it's true. So we don't get what? What? Attached. So what this is all coming back to, well, let's before we get to the implications, let's just deal with this empty nature of things. Any questions? I mean, this is all right. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and we'll have to leave a little time for yeah. Go on. Well, that's what you mean of understanding this. Well, the consensus reality is the world of appearances. It is the ordinary world, okay, in which we are born. I mean, just continue with Kevin. Kevin exists in this body, and he uses language, and so this is the reality of ordinary people. Okay, so in Buddhism, it doesn't say let's go to another reality, the reality of the absolute, the reality of the spiritual. No, it says instead go the other way. See the empty nature of the world of appearances. That's the way to freedom. Okay. On the wall there is something called the Heart Sutra. If any of you hang around Buddhist centers a lot, you'll hear the Heart Sutra. It says, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Most people go, oh, world of form, world of emptiness. But no, it's the same world. When we look at Kevin, right, from one point of view, here's Kevin. There's his Kevin in his form, with the label Kevin. But when we look more deeply, we see there's nothing there of any solidity. Doesn't mean he's not here. I mean, the way he looks now is just a temporary phenomenon. Right? Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 So you're just hold that because that's really the next point, which is the implications of this. So he's just saying, hey, but I hear you, Fred, but we have to label and we have to function and we have to call things by names and isn't this true too? You're absolutely right. Okay. And there was another, yes. Yeah, it's gonna hurt. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, again, that's a good point. So the question is, if I drop a hammer on my foot, is that an illusion? And from the world of appearances, no. A hammer is fallen on your foot and it hurts in the world of appearances. By the way, have you ever been hurt in your life? Okay. Are those experiences still going on right this second? Okay. Even though at the moment they happened, they had a temporary reality, right? Which we'll acknowledge. Ow, that hurt. But yet, the next second, something else happens. and something else happens, and something else happens. I mean, it's really fascinating when you really observe, as we're really what meditation's about, observe experience. Yeah. Yeah, it rusts, it falls apart. A hammer, what's a hammer? A hammer's made of wood and a metal head, right? Both of them were created. They didn't, that hammer has not existed endlessly as a hammer, has it? No, somebody created it, right? I mean, that hammer is trees. Trees are earth and sky and water and clouds, right? And birds, loggers, sawyers, finishers, factories that make candles. We can go over here with the metal and all that stuff that came together. Put together, you go to Home Depot and you'd say what? I want a hammer. Right? But there's no self-existent thing, a hammer that's always been there and always will be there. If you think it is, right, that one time when you go like that and it breaks, you're going to be very what? Disappointed, because you thought what? What? I had a permanent a hammer. It certainly looked permanent in the store. They certainly sold it to you, right? What? Yeah, yeah. So, right? Yeah. But when you understand that everything is empty, you understand that even though it appears solid, it's just made of parts. This whole earth is this whole earth? Look what's going on our earth. Changing, changing. Why is it changing? Because it's not a solid thing. It's subject to all kinds of causes and conditions. Things are impermanent because they're empty of solidity. That's why everything changes. So the key thing is, how do you live in the world of change with stability and openness and groundedness? See, this is the profundity of this teaching, right? It allows Kevin to know that that which he sees in the mirror and that which everybody calls Kevin is not Kevin. Is not the real Kevin. And that body that seems so solid is just a temporary thing. Isn't it true? For most people, knowing that is frightening, the fact. But for somebody who has Shantideva calls it an aptitude for emptiness. So again, please understand, when you hear the word empty, it doesn't mean like this room is empty. It means it's empty of permanence and solidity. That's what it's empty of. Okay? It means that Kevin is empty of a true existent Kevin. But as you said, we can still call him Kevin, right? If there's a room full of 40 people and I want to talk to Kevin, I'd say, Kevin, right? And hopefully Kevin would answer, because he knows in this illusionary world of appearances, he goes by the name of Kevin. But he's not a solid, real Kevin. Anybody here ever change their name? People change their names, right? Gets a little getting used to. I mean, how many different languages are there on Earth? Alex, how many languages on Earth? Thousands? I mean, a lot. I mean, they're all referring to this, right? Right? I mean, if we were a room and everybody here spoke a different language and didn't, right, understand each other's language, we'd think, oh my God, everybody's seeing something different because they have a different word for it. But all the words refer to this. That's why we want to have direct experience and not through words. Words separate us. Right? If you just listen to the news and what's going on in the world, they're just using words to what? To separate. So we don't see clearly that we all are the same, right? That everybody, at least who has a good pair of eyes, no matter whether young or old, whatever their sexuality, gender, religion, ethnic, I mean, every possible division you could think of, everybody sees the same thing. See, if we have good hearing, we all hear the same bell, even though we're all different. But that's where we're the same. And that's where we come together. We all come together because we're empty of solidity. We're all temporarily here. Right? Do you think our noble president reflects in this way? Everything's impermanent. I'm not the center of the world. Everything is empty. Right? Everybody wants to be happy. Nobody wants to be sad. You see? These very simple ways of looking at the world are transformative. But we're not focusing on that we all see the same flower. What are we focusing on in the world? That everybody calls it by a different name. And let's decide who's calling it by its right name. You see? That's the problem. So that's why we need mindfulness and meditation and teachings that allow us to see we're all looking at the same thing. It's just this. Right? Doesn't matter whether you had a good childhood or a miserable childhood. Right? In this moment, here it is. Right? What does our childhood have anything to do with this? Is that true? But if we're focused on our childhood, we won't see that. That in this moment, we all have the capacity of being what? What? Awake and present to something beautiful. So, thank you, Kevin. Should we put them back together? So I was going to read more from Shantideva, but somehow I got carried away. Carried away by emptiness. I guess I should get in the right chapter. I just want to read a few more things. He says here, this is verse 25, it's not indeed our purpose to disprove experiences of sight or sound or knowing. Right? So he's saying, I'm not doing all this to negate, to make a point, right? That there's really nothing inherently solid in any experience. You know what I mean? This is not a philosophical point. This is not a Buddhist point. He's saying, our aim here is to undermine the cause of sorrow. The thought that such phenomena have a true existence. So, why are these teachings, these wisdom teachings, being taught and being shared? Because they end our sorrow. That's their only purpose. The reason that people suffer is they've not rid themselves of habits of desiring objects of perception. And when they gaze upon such things, their aptitude for emptiness is weak indeed. By training in this aptitude for emptiness, the habit to perceive real things will be relinquished. By training in the thought, there isn't anything, this view itself will be abandoned. And, what is your name? Yeah, Tammy, that's right. So he says, see, he anticipated your question. He said, when something and its non-existence are both absent from the mind, no other option does the latter have. It comes to perfect rest, from concepts free. Right? So when we end up this endless back and forth of the mind, right? So this. What happens? The mind just comes to rest. It's at peace. It's no longer disturbed by all the comings and goings of the external world or the internal world. This is another line, and then I'll take some questions. This is a great line, or verse. And here samsara means, again, the world of birth and death, the world of suffering. To linger and abide within samsara, freed from every craving and from every fear, in order to achieve the good of those who ignorantly suffer. Such is the fruit that emptiness will bear. Let me read that again, because it really cuts to the essence of what's being taught. To linger and abide within samsara. So our goal is not to leave this world. It's not to leave the world of appearances. It's not to move to Canada. Okay, this is not, all right? Our object, since we want to ease the suffering of the world, is to remain in the world, but because we've been freed ourselves from every craving and every fear. That's shorthand for saying, we're no longer endlessly craving things. All kinds of things, mental things, emotional things, physical things, right? And we no longer have fear. We're not afraid if this happens or this doesn't happen, right? So we can exist within the world of change with all the terrible things and the craziness that's going on in our world. We can stay here, but our mind can be at peace. Because in order to achieve the good of those who ignorantly suffer, that's the purpose. That's what the Bodhisattva lives for, right? To help people who suffer. And he says, this is the fruit of emptiness. Okay? This is the fruit of emptiness. That one can stay in the world and be of benefit to people. And have a good mind. Because one sees, right, the empty nature of everything. Now, for some of you who are familiar with these teachings, maybe things are more understandable after this talk. If some of you are just totally befuddled, that's fine. Okay? These are deep teachings, and they really contradict kind of everything that we believe. So that's fine. So just play with it, okay? Begin to introduce the notion. Things may not be as solid as they appear. Right? I mean, what is the difference between last night's dream and everything you did yesterday? They're both the same, aren't they? You're just memories. Do either one have any more reality than the other? Think about it. Do they? All right. Oh. Uh-huh. No, I mean, everything has cause and effect. So in the world of appearances, in the relative world, it functions according to cause and conditions, cause and effect, or interdependent origination. Everything, right? So everything is produced by causes. Mental, physical, sounds. I mean, it's all, yeah. There's nothing that's self-existence. There's nothing that comes out of nowhere. I mean, that in itself is a logical inconsistency. that something can come out of nothing. Right? Only nothing can come out of nothing. If Kevin wasn't produced by Kevin, right? Kevin, you want to stand up again? So if Kevin wasn't produced by Kevin, if he was produced by this sperm and this egg, things that look nothing like him, right? Then what? Then he's just in process. There's nothing solid or permanent about anything about Kevin. Right? Causes and conditions came together, right, to produce, the first fertile egg. Everything hopefully went all right, and it kind of reproduced or whatever it does, and took on a little form and began to look like a little salamander, and eventually kind of developed along the way till it kind of right, and all of a sudden it popped out. Didn't look anything like him. Didn't wear glasses, and all of a sudden it's developed to this stage. That's all, and it's going to continue. We shouldn't be shocked when we look in the mirror and you go, "That's not the way I look." That's because we don't understand emptiness. Right? There was never anything solid about me and my body. There's nothing solid about my thoughts. There's nothing solid about my mind. Right? For all of you who were trying to meditate this morning and practice mindfulness, did you only have one thought the whole time? No, how many thoughts did you have? Alex knows. How many thoughts did they probably have in the last 4.5 hours? 3.5 hours. Day. So divided by, okay. So, right. The mind keeps changing. The thoughts keep changing. Good thoughts, bad thoughts, stupid thoughts, wise thoughts. Isn't that what's going on? Everything is empty of solidity. There was another question. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's a good question. So the question is, hey, I mean, qualitatively, there was a difference between what went on in this consensual reality yesterday and what happened on in my dream. Yes. But the point I was making, which is a little different, that they both, now that they've passed, have the same dreamlike quality. That they've passed. They don't exist anymore. That's what I meant when I say they are. Maybe it's better to say they're dreamlike. Right? In other words, your whole past. I mean, even from childhood, it's dreamlike. I mean, in other words, it's not real anymore. It just you remember it, right? As thoughts and images, but it's not real anymore. It's dreamlike, this life. But isn't that what they say in row, row, row your boat? Row, row, row your boat. Life is but a dream. So, I mean, we were taught that as children, right? We must have missed that one in preschool. Our parents never said, right? They never, right? Kevin, your parents never, when they taught you that song, never said, "Kevin, life is but a dream." What? They didn't label it as emptiness. Yeah. So, I mean, again, but there it was, right there in preschool. Life is but a dream. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's all the mind. Yeah, it's all the mind. I mean, what's a dream made of? I mean, the dreams are created by our mind, right? Thoughts are created by our mind. Feelings are created by our mind. Images are created by our mind. Memory is created. These are all things that are going on in mind, right? Right? It's like you could have, 100,000 different kind of mugs, all looking differently, but they're all made of clay. They all have the same essence. Right? they appear differently. They have different form because they've been, molded in a certain way, right? But they're all clay. They have the same essence. And they're all empty of any solidity. That's why they crack when you drop them and chip. We shouldn't be disappointed. Yes. Think about theistic language. Oh. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Again, so the question is about theism and the immanence of God, and isn't it getting at the same thing? Since I'm not from that tradition, I wouldn't say. But I would say find that Christian mystic who has realized totally the immanence of God and ask them. Okay? Yes. Last question. Or was there anybody else we really need to end? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so let us say, so the question Alex is concerned about is there may be people in this audience who are hearing the teachings for the first time, hearing that everything is intrinsically empty of any solidity, everything's impermanent, it's all an illusion, a delusion. They may just walk out into Nebraska Avenue and get run over. Right? I think he was talking about you, Kevin. He was concerned about. Is there something about Kevin you know that I don't know? That yeah. So again, and this is deep stuff. Okay, and even saying deep stuff is missing the point. Again, this teaching does not deny conventional reality, right? Even though Paul over here may have a profound understanding of the empty nature of all phenomena, when he drops that hammer on his foot, it's going to hurt, right? Whether you have a profound understanding of emptiness or not. Okay? Is that clear? So even if you think you have a profound sense of emptiness, Alex, I would say continue to pay your mortgage, right? Make payments on your insurance. You know what I'm saying? I have to say, take care of consensual reality, but don't obsess about it. Okay? That's our problem. We're so fixated on the solidity of things. We don't realize they're all empty. So again, understanding emptiness does not disallow the laws of causality, of cause and effect. You step into traffic, good chance you're going to get hurt. You drop a hammer, good chance you're going to get hurt. You eat rancid food, good chance you'll get sick. You do harmful things to yourself, there's a good chance you'll experience suffering. You do positive things for yourself, there's a good chance you'll experience goodness in your life. So that's in this consensual world, this relative world, this world that appears, it has its own laws that have to be respected. It's again, Buddhism. This teaching is a both-and teaching. Our minds are usually either or, but if it's this, it's got no. It's a both. It's both at the same time. Okay. So if you drop the hammer on your foot, it hurts. But, don't keep whining about it. You see? You see what I'm saying? That's where that's where you fixate it. See, that's where we start causing suffering for ourselves. Right? Yeah. You drop your hammer on the foot, you know, massage your foot or do something for it, take care of it. It's all that other stuff we do. So it is 12:36, so we're a few minutes behind. Thank you.